Hello everyone, my name is Nicole Fegan and I watched 14 films in the month of October. This month started and ended really strong, but in the middle was a lot of stuff that was very disappointing. I watched a lot of 2021 releases. I feel like I'm definitely going to disappoint some people with my opinions on some of these films, so let's just get started. Up first, starting out the month strong, I watched Shoplifters, directed by Hirokazu Kurita. This was released in 2018 and I gave this 4.5 stars. This is a drama film that follows this family that, as indicated by the title, routinely shoplifts to get by, and they find this young girl who they think is lost or maybe missing, who they take in and kind of help raise. I think what is so brilliant about this film is the way it kind of establishes its tone only to kind of flip it on its head midway through the film. I think this film kind of, the impressions I got from it, from people talking about it, were that it was like cozy and feel good, and I think it actually does a lot of work in establishing a very cozy and wholesome tone and environment, and then when kind of the film reveals itself to obviously not just be this cozy portrait of a family, that works incredibly well. I think on like the emotional and political and thematic levels, this just works. It's just hitting, firing on all cylinders, that's the expression. I thought it was heartbreaking and just incredibly well done. Next I watched The Invitation, directed by Karen Kusama. This is a kind of psychological thriller that was released in 2015. I gave this 2.5 stars. This film is about this guy who is invited to this house party by his ex-wife, I think it is, and things totally aren't what they seem. There's just weird bad vibes happening the whole time. My biggest problem with this film is how incredibly obvious it is. It kind of like lays out like, ooh, is this thing going on? And like, I won't tell you what happens, but the way it all concludes, it's like, okay. I found it was a thriller that wasn't actually very thrilling, and then I think the thing that bothered me most is it has this final shot that I think is kind of supposed to be like, whoa, surprising, like, holy shit, that gives the movie a whole new meaning, but it just reads as like the director or the writer had this idea for this final shot and wrote the whole film around it. Everything else feels in service of like this final reveal that isn't even that exciting. I just thought it was kind of amateurish. Skip your time. It's not even like excitingly bad. It's just like, nah. The first 2021 film I watched this month was Annette, directed by Leos Carax, totally mispronounced that. I gave this 4 stars, which was exciting because I really didn't like Holy Motors, but I quite enjoyed this. On the surface, this is a musical about a stand-up comedian and an opera singer who get together, have this relationship, get married, have a baby, things go awry, they're in the limelight. That's the plot. But I think this is a movie that I appreciated less for what happened and more for how it felt. It felt kind of like this Venn diagram of like Shakespearean and Lynchian. I felt like the whole time I was watching, my mouth was just like agape. I think this is one of those films where a lot, to me at least, maybe I'm an idiot, but a lot still feels unanswered, why there were certain artistic choices and story choices made. I'm not totally sure I'm the person to articulate why it works so well, and yet kind of in the way that happens when you're watching a traditional musical, I was in awe, but not like the way when, you know, you watch Wicked and you're in awe because like pretty glitzy glam and like the spectacle in front of you. I felt like that same kind of awe was translated to this awe of like, I don't know what's happening, but I'm glad it's all happening. It's incredibly weird. I'm not sure I particularly liked the music, and yet I liked the effect the music had on the film's experience. Plus, if you were ever forced to watch The Big Bang Theory with your parents when you were a kid, and you thought Howard Wolowitz was just the stupidest guy on the planet and that actor can't possibly be good at anything, this movie will change your opinion on him because he has this one scene where he's like conducting an orchestra that is just the best scene in the entire thing. It's so good. Next, I saw in theaters Titane, directed by Julia Ducournau. I gave this 3.5 stars and really enjoyed it. This is another very, I feel like, visceral, somewhat inexplicable film. This is a body horror film about this woman who, when she was a kid, had a titanium plate put in her head from a car accident she was in. The description of this film on Letterboxd gives a very different description. I think it says something like, due to unforeseen circumstances, a man is reconnected with his son who went missing years ago, which is also what this film is about. I think this film works because of how visceral it feels. You're really following this central character, and there are other people who matter, but I feel like you really get deep into her psychology. While again, there also, I feel like, still being certain things that are left unanswered. Things I didn't quite like, I thought the film might have had some pacing issues. It does kind of feel like two very disparate films spliced together. I've seen some people like the first third better, I've seen some people like the second two-thirds better, and I don't know if that's a problem with the film, maybe just something to note. This, kind of like Annette, just had also moments that really rocked my world. There is a scene towards the end of the film where someone is dancing on top of a fire truck, and I was just like sitting there in the theater just completely transfixed by like everything that that scene meant. And again, I'm not the smartest person in the world to have the answers to you about what Titane entirely means, but I'm here to tell you it's very good and very worth checking out. Next, I watched Chien Andalou, directed by Louis Buñuel. We're really just fucking this shit up, aren't we, today? This is a short experimental film made in 1929, and I gave this 3.5 stars out of respect. This is a short, avant-garde, surrealist film that is basically just a series of unconnected, dreamlike, nightmare-like images and scenes just like put together. There is no logic to this film. From what I can gather from like reading stuff, this is a thing that is often watched in like film school, which makes sense. I think it is a very, very important piece of film history. It was released in 1929 and probably doing things that no other film had done, which is really cool. I think if I did a little bit more reading on like the why and the how this film was made, I might appreciate it even more, but as it stands, watching this does kind of feel like absorbing a piece of filmic history more than it feels like watching a film. So I really appreciate it, but it's not something I see myself going back to. Next, I watched Her, directed by Spike Jonze. This was released in 2013. And I gave this 2.5 stars. I really wanted to like Her, and instead I felt like I had a lot of problems with Her. Her is about a man who lives in like a near-distant future who develops a relationship with an AI. It's like this new AI system, you know, like you have a little earplug, and you can talk to them, and like they basically do what you need them to do to be for you, and the two of them develop a relationship. Here is my problem with Her. I think the film knows that the viewer is going to be skeptical of this relationship because, oh, it's a computer. And then what it does is it has all these human-human relationships have the same problem as the two of them. So obviously the problem with like an AI relationship is that it's a computer designed to like kowtow or like be exactly what the human needs them to be. But then you see all these human-human relationships in the film that follow that exact same formula. Person A is kind of sacrificing a lot of themselves for person B, basically being exactly what person B needs them to be. It feels like one of the theses of the film is all relationships are as fake as you, the viewer, think this AI-human relationship is. And I think that's supported by the fact that, maybe this is a spoiler alert, really none of the relationships in this film work. There's not a single example of like a relationship that does work, and I don't need every film to be happy. Not every film needs to be like a romance that proves that love exists. But when your film's thesis is actually all relationships are doomed because in relationships you are destined to give up too much of yourself. I mean, there's even a line where like Amy Adams says like, I haven't felt joy in years. It's like, okay, film, are you saying that like there's no joy to be had in relationships? And I guess maybe I'm just not that cynical right now. I think there are other viewings of this film, other interpretations, but that's just the one that I got. I think that its messaging is honestly just a little too bleak and not something that I vibe with, and I think, I don't know, it didn't work for me. Might as well continue on the disappointed train. Next, I watched The Last Duel, directed by Ridley Scott, that came out this year. I saw this before anyone else I knew saw it, and I immediately didn't like this. I've given this 1.5 stars, and then everyone whose opinions I, like, see and respect, pretty much everyone has liked it. So if you liked this film before going into my thoughts, please know I am happy that you have liked it. I just hated it. So The Last Duel is about this knight who challenges a squire who used to be like his best friend to a duel because the squire has raped the knight's wife. That is the premise of the film, and I think my discussion of this might be a little more spoilery than somebody who wants to go into this film knowing nothing would be. So if you don't want to hear me talk about this, skip to this time, and you won't get any spoilers. So this film is split into three parts. First, you have the events of the film as kind of remembered by Sir Jean de Carouge, who is Matt Damon. Then you have the events of the film as remembered by Jacques Legris, who is Adam Driver. And then you have the events of the film as remembered by whatever, by Marguerite de Carouge, who is the woman, the wife. At the end of the first part, Marguerite tells her husband that she has been raped by Jacques Legris. that information is thrown out there, and we, the audience, and he, the husband, are basically, you know, forced to believe her. We should believe her. And then in the second part, we see the rape scene, and then again in the third part, we see the rape scene. I think this is probably done by the filmmakers to show she was telling the truth. You know, even in Adam Driver's little section, Jacques Legree's section, it's clearly a rape scene. It's not like, you know, they remembered it differently. It is very clearly what happened. I think this is a massive problem with the film. Not that rape can never be shown on screen, or that is always a bad idea, but in this film, which is basically just like a Me Too film happening in medieval France, we are being told a woman's testimony, and we are given what we are not given in real life, which is proof. I think it completely undoes probably the biggest thing of the Me Too movement, which is that you should believe women when they are telling, when they come forward with things. And you know, not that like every single part of a film has to be a political statement, but this film is clearly a political film, and I find it just so deeply irresponsible of the film that, like, just kind of like to hammer it home that she's telling us the truth, it gives us evidence, which is something we are not granted in real life. I just find that it completely undoes the point of this story, the potential power of this story. Because it turns whether or not you believe her into a point of tension for the film. Once the second part starts and you realize, oh, we're about to get the events as told by Jacques Legree, you're like, wonder if it really was a rape. And like that, I feel like that kind of doubt and tension is like the last thing you should want to be promoting in this Me Too film or whatever. I articulate these thoughts probably a little bit better in my review of the film that I have on Letterboxd. Again, if you liked this, I think that is good. There were some good performances in this film. I just found that what I thought it was trying to do thematically, it completely failed and basically ruined the film for me. Next, I watched Speed, directed by Jean de Bont. This came out in 1994. And I gave this 3 stars for a good time, because in Speed, there is a bomb trapped to the bottom of a bus. And once the bus starts going over 50 miles per hour, it can't stop going over 50 miles per hour, or else the bomb will go off. And so Keanu Reeves, a cop, is basically trying to get these bus passengers to safety. It's a hell of a time. It's fun, but it also did feel kind of amateurish, like the acting and the script and the pacing. It was all kind of all over the place in like silly but still entertaining ways. I felt like the final third or fourth of this film was like so weirdly done. It felt like it should have ended like 8 different times, but Speed was still fun, especially coming after The Last Duel. I was like, I just need something that's gonna be a fun time to watch while answering emails. Then I watched Dune. I'm sorry, guys. Dune came out this year. I gave Dune 3 stars. Here was my problem with Dune. My problem with Dune had very little to do with the movie and everything to do with the marketing. Because you know when like you go into a movie and you kind of you have expectations of movies. Some movies, nothing happens in them, and you kind of pick up on that from the beginning. You're like, I'm watching a Jim Jarmusch film, nothing's gonna happen in this movie. But I went into Dune unaware that this was just a part 1 movie, even though it says part 1 in the beginning. Something like, you know, The Last Duel has part 1, part 2, part 3. So I spent the whole fucking 2.5 hours waiting for some kind of shoe to drop. Waiting for, you know, you don't need a perfect witch's hat of every single film, but waiting for some kind of momentum to pick up, and then the movie ended. I think that was a massive failure in marketing, because I think this film does so much exposition on the world building and on these characters and the setup, but I left the film basically feeling like this was set up. You know, you look at something like the Star Wars original trilogy, and like, yeah, maybe episode 4 sets a lot up for episode 5, but like, it's also its own little story. Dune Part 1 felt like Dune Part 1. I left the movie being like, I just saw Dune. It wasn't a bad movie, but it was like, okay. This is like the most cynical I've ever been in any of these wrap-ups. I think I went into this with, I guess, higher expectations, and left feeling like almost completely neutral. Luckily though, friendship is ended with cynical Nicole, because everything I watched for the rest of the month ruled. Next I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, which was released sometime in the 90s. It was released in 1992. I gave this 4 stars and had a hell of a time. So Dracula's a vampire, and Keanu Reeves again, he is this like, he does real estate or something, and he's at Dracula's place because Dracula wants to buy these buildings. It does not matter what happens in this movie. This is just the horniest movie of all time. It's dark, it's horny, it's kinda silly. It's not one of those movies that's like so bad it's good, but like there were certain like acting and set piece choices that were like on the verge. It was kind of campy. It was kind of campy horror in a way that like really added to the atmosphere. Winona Ryder is both gorgeous and incredible in this. Gary Oldman is such a fun Dracula. Keanu Reeves is abysmally bad in this, and he makes a movie 10 times better, and this was a very fun thing to watch like right before Halloween. Next I watched Harakiri, directed by Masaki Kobayashi. This came out in 1962. I gave this 4.5 stars, and this is in a little category that I like to call perfect films that aren't 5 stars for me. I think in this category is like The Thing, Heat, and Harakiri. There is not a single thing this film does wrong, it just for some reason does not reach like the 5-star threshold for me. This is about a samurai who arrives at a home and requests to commit a ritual suicide, Harakiri. I thought that the narrative structure of this film, the way it is told through storytelling and flashback and past and present, was so expertly done. The cinematography was on point, the like action sequences were on point, and the way this thematically deals with like those issues of family and tradition and honor, it's just like I felt like I learned and was entertained and moved all at the same time. This film really is just like a tour de force of filmmaking. It was incredible, and I'm kind of already excited to watch it again whenever in, like 6 years I pick this up again. Next is probably my favorite film that I watched this month, and that is Taste of Cherry, directed by Abbas Kiarostami. This came out in 1997. I give this 4.5 stars, very nearly a 5. Like, if I think about this for one more week, it might join the 5-star category. This film is about a man who wishes to commit suicide, and he is driving around. Wow, sorry, 2 films about suicide back to back. Didn't even realize that when I was writing up my notes or watching these films. But he's driving around trying to find someone who will bury him. He's gonna take these sleeping pills, lie down in a ditch, and he's looking for someone who will in the morning either like wake him up if he hasn't died by the pills, or will bury him. What I love so much about this film is how much the film loves life. And it wants you to love life, but I don't feel like it's didactic at all. I don't think it is ever unnecessarily somber, melancholic, or like cliche or cheesy. It doesn't do traditional things of like trying to show you how to appreciate life. And I think the ending, which I think is kind of an iconic ending, but I didn't know about it going into it, supports this, because it's saying I have laid the groundwork for this story and I cannot make the decisions. I think there's kind of a theme throughout the movie. Like he goes through a few people, like a few people who don't want to bury him, but you see this conversation between them who are like, I don't know what's going on in your life, but. And I feel like that's kind of the theme of the movie. The movie does not know what's going on in the viewer's life, but here is this like exploration of life and death, with just like some of the most stunning conversations I've ever seen in film, some of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen in film. I think it must be tricky to do a thoughtful film about suicide, because obviously, like, I don't want people to die, I don't want people to commit suicide, and I feel like to be able to communicate that so, not subtly, but yeah, like just so thoughtfully, it was so moving. And I can imagine at the right time in someone's life could be life-changing. Then my final 2021 film I watched this month was No Time to Die, the Bond movie. I gave this 3.5 stars. I had a hell of a time. So the only other Bond movie I've ever seen is Skyfall. I have heard from people that like knowing the other Bond movies before this is important. A friend who I saw this with kind of like gave me the TLDR on Spectre, the one right before this, which I feel like kind of lays a lot of groundwork. But even without having seen it, I thought this was pretty easy to follow, and just like, I think it does everything that you'd expect a Bond movie to do. I can't say that because I'm, again, not really the Bond target audience, nor have I seen the others, but like everything I went into this expecting, coolness and action sequences and like a weird-ass villain and tension, I just thought it did it pretty well. To me, I've kind of thought that the whole point of the Bond franchise is to make the audience either want to be him or fuck him, and I feel like this movie accomplishes that. I saw his glitzy glamour, badass life where he moves with all this confidence, and I was like, I too would like to be Mr. James Bond. So it was a successful movie in my eyes, and I thought the ending was good. You might thought the ending was bad if you have more knowledge about the Bond franchise, but I thought it was good. Finally, this video has been all over the place, especially because like midway through filming, I got a call from my maintenance guy, which completely threw me off track, but finishing this, I rewatched Paterson, directed by Jim Jarmusch. This came out in 2016 and stars Adam Driver. This is a 5-star, now, forever, probably always. Paterson is probably the movie that got me into movies. My boyfriend showed this to me now about like 4.5 years ago when we started dating, and I was like, wow, that blew my mind. This is about Adam Driver, who plays a bus driver and poet named Paterson living in Paterson, New Jersey. And my thoughts about this film change pretty much every time I watch it. I've written like 3 college papers about this movie. It's like just so close to my heart, but at this point I kind of feel like this movie is an ode to everyday life, but not just the experience of it. I think it really cares about kind of like this observational standpoint on life. Because Paterson's not just a completely unreflective man. Yes, he lives his very mundane life, he does the same thing all the time, but the key difference between him and I feel like a lot of characters that we see in movies about the everyday is the fact that he writes poetry, is the fact that he is a microcosm for the film. The film is watching. The film is watching Paterson watching. And sorry, my like Brown University fucking paper writing terminology or brain I feel like is coming out. But I feel like this movie is about the moments of agency and the moments of viewing we have even in our small lives. I just think this movie is a film that is in love with looking. In love with the ability to exist and to witness what we've existed in or observed. I just find it really beautiful as someone who also lives not a very exciting life, but finds it very beautiful nonetheless. I think this, not like it's a guide for, not that it's telling you in order to love your life you have to write poetry, but obviously you don't make a movie about something unless you want to interrogate it. You don't write a poem about something unless you want to explore it. And I feel like just the whole project of this movie existing and of Paterson as main character is that there is beauty in not only living, but in the looking and taking note of it. Anyways, it's a beautiful film, very life-affirming, and it's stunning, and Jim Jarmusch is my favorite director of all time. Thank you so much for watching this probably pseudo-controversial little movie review YouTube video, my god. For some reason I felt awfully insecure about my feelings about The Last Duel, you know? You see people whose opinions you respect and they all like a thing and you dislike a thing and you start to wonder like, well, I must be an idiot, when in reality we could both be right because opinions are subjective. That is all I have for you today. I hope you have gotten some good recommendations or anti-recommendations out of this video, and you will see me in the next one.